Well, hello! More excitement today, but also a bit of confusion over this latest quad I've just received from Gearbest. And here it is, it's the Walkera Rodeo 110. Now, I was slightly confused for two reasons. Firstly, it's not the quad that I'd actually agreed with Gearbest to review, but that's okay. Go ahead. Send me what you like and I'll do what I can with it. Secondly, it's got a huge box. Why has it got a huge box for a 110mm quad? And I can answer that question by getting it out of the box. Very nice arrangement and packing in here. Jump in with me and I'll show you what we're looking at here. Proper, it's more like unpacking a sort of nice hi-fi or something where you've got all the inserts just right. If we open up the main section, we've got the quad itself, quite heavy for a little 110, and that's mainly because of this 800 milliamp battery it's got stuck on it, a 2-cell. It's very bespoke looking, lots of moulded pieces, lots of slight differences. Even the ESCs are just held off slightly with these screws, and there's, you know, it's all covered in plastic bits so you can't really see what's going on. Some props here, helpfully labelled spare parts. Got a USB cable here, and when we open up or pull this section out, this is the reason why the box is so big. This is a Dimension Devo 7 radio. Proper feeling radio, not bad gimbals at all. Pretty nice feeling. Of which there's a trainer cable, a balanced charger, US version, although it takes multi-voltage, so not really a problem. You've then got hard copy instructions for the little quad and instructions on a CD for the radio. So what you've got here is something designed for someone who's never actually owned a quad before and thus doesn't have a radio. And this is it's not a system I've used before, but you know, just feeling how the sticks are and the switches, you know, it's not a sort of cheap as chips awful radio. It actually feels pretty nice. So this would be quite nice. Anyway, I guess this will get someone started up. So in reviewing this, I'll try and put myself in the position of a pure beginner, see if the instructions are good enough to get this thing set up, see how it flies out of the box, more importantly, because what someone new to the hobby wouldn't be doing is instantly diving into Betaflight and sorting everything out. So let's get in there and see what we got. Well, there was no setup to do on this because it already had everything there out of the box, so that was pretty simple. Of course, I was quite curious to see what this was running, as the instructions for the said, and bear in mind we've got all these switches all over the radio. We literally just use this one switch, which is basic, intermediate, advanced. Now, looking at how this was read, it told me that on the basic flight it would self-level and I wouldn't be able to roll it, so I figured that was angle. On the advanced one it would still self-level, but I would be able to roll it all the way over, so that's probably horizon, and advanced is probably acro. Now I thought I'd pop into Betaflight and see if I could check this, see what it was running, and it comes up as running 0.3.3, which is either a really early level of Betaflight or they've written their own code for it and it's all slightly different. It was to the point of being so different than what runs there now, it won't actually let me go into configurate and look at it. I can dump stuff out and I could see there were some odd values in there, but not actually look at it myself. But you know, I'm going into this as though I am a new flyer, so I want to use it as default. The radio as is, the quad as is, and I'll even use the camera as is, just pointing straight, and see how that goes for starters. Because I'm interested to know how well it's set up. They've obviously done something with it. Is it going to fly really nicely out of the box, or do we go, ugh, that's horrible, let's flash 317 onto it and go from there? It's running on a SP Racing F3 board, or at least that's what the firmware runs. That's as much as I can tell right now. Another thing I found I quite liked about the frame is the power socket there. So you get your battery and it just plugs in like that. So there's no trailing wires anywhere. That's going to carry on yapping now. So this actually binds every time. As soon as you turn it on, it makes that little noise where it's trying to bind to something. And all you have to do is plug in at the same time. And that is then bound up. So of course there are a few basic things I'd use all the time now that aren't going to be here. Switch arming for one. This tells you to arm on the sticks. There's no air mode for this, not in that version of code anyway, and nothing that I could see when I dumped. So that's going to be interesting. Don't lower the throttle too much when going inverted is going to be the key. But yeah, well let's take it as read. Let's go in the guise of a newbie to the hobby. I've got my drone. Let's see how it flies with the radio, with it completely set up stock, not changing a thing. And then I'll come back and decide what we need to change, but let's see how it flies first. Okay, out of the field at last, and with the useful little headlight on, let's get this flying. Let's do a bit of a line over sight, see how it feels, and do some FPV, obviously. Again, everything's stock, haven't touched a thing. Camera is dead straight. This is the 850 default battery. Yeah, let's try it. Okay, arming on stick. Okay, so this is in angle. How would it feel? How does it feel? Yeah, and as you expect, it's pretty much no hassle. Just flick it along. So let's try changing that to horizon, if I remember the switch. It's this one. Not that one. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Oh yeah, got more movement now. It's still pretty easy, but much more responsive. Just terrible line of sight flyer. And then all the way down with the acro, without air mode of course, which, yeah, feels about the same as horizon, but obviously you leave your stick, it just goes around. I think the main thing to take away here is, if you want to do line of sight in the beginning, if you put it in angle, or it's beginner mode as it is here, then even as a little quad it's still fairly easy to follow and fly around. Even for me, I'm alright with bigger quads. Little quads like this, it's like, where am I? What's it look like? I can't tell. Anyway, let's try FPVing it. So away we go and up in the air, and I've actually taken off in angle, or basic mode as they call it here, and I can't get on with it. So this is me messing around trying to find the switch, and I'm basically through to acro, which feels a lot more comfortable. Obviously, you know, if you're a beginner you might well be tempted to fly FPV in angle, which I don't necessarily think is a good idea, but you know, it's there. I just cannot fly in that mode in FPV now. It just feels really odd. But here we are in acro, and you know, it's doing okay, isn't it? It's doing its job. Now, I was out flying the AR Fun at the same time, and swapping to this one, the camera was noticeably softer. It's not quite so sharp. It looks, well, I think just soft focus really. But you know, it's flyable most certainly, and the signal's not too bad at all from the VTX. The roll and pitch rate on it is okay. You saw me do a little roll there, and that's about the max speed. And obviously with the flat camera we can't go very fast, else we'd just be looking at the grass. But hey, it's meeting its criteria here about being able to fly out of the box without doing anything to it using the radio. A couple of weird things though. I felt when I was looking at the radio earlier that the sticks felt pretty good. I'm flying around here, and compared to my Tyrannus they feel very loose. I was starting to think that the throttle wasn't on a ratchet. It is, it's just noticeably looser than my normal radio. This is just a personal opinion though. There's nothing wrong with it, it's just looser than I'm used to, so I'd like to sort that out.
So the other little weird thing about the way this flies is it seems to be kind of fighting me, and I'm not sure if that's actually the case, but when I put a control in, it feels like just at the end of my stick input it sort of bobs back a bit, like there's a bit of bounce back, which, you know, I wasn't too keen on. And at this point the battery alarm has already started going off, and I'm trying to bring it in, and I seem to be having to put more and more throttle in. So it started going off after 2 minutes this flight, and maybe there was a minute of hovering around. So for an 850 battery that feels a bit short, and I managed to completely mess up my landing here, and I might as well have just thrown the whole thing in a puddle looking at how wet this grass is.
Okay, aside from being covered in water, we've just changed the camera angle just subtly, so it's just poking up a little bit, and we've put a better battery on this 550 Goning, or whatever it's called. Hopefully it's down there. Let's just see if that's any better. Right.
So now covered in water, off we go again, and that might be where some of the noise is coming from. And it feels a bit better to fly now the camera angle's up a bit, although I'm still slightly annoyed by the fact it's bobbling. I don't know, maybe it's the receiver, maybe this is using PPM, and I'm now noticing the difference between this and the normal S-Bus and having some sort of weird latency there that I wasn't used to in other quads. And this battery does almost exactly the same thing. After a minute it starts bleeping at me, and I would expect a lot more, but one of the things I don't know is how they've set up the low voltage indicator. It's not a light quad, but you know, these are fairly decent batteries I've just put in it. It was a very cold day, and that's having a problem on all my batteries, so it's very hard to really get a good gauge on how they're doing. But I had to put this down fairly quickly, mainly because somebody phoned me and really put me off. And bringing it in low like this makes me think that the throttle range is a little bit weird. I'm having real trouble getting it low without hitting the ground. You saw that initial landing was very bad and hit the grass. This one pretty much the same, got a bit of a bounce there, and that was it. I was in the drink.
So I only did 2 batteries on this little thing, but I got all the information I needed from that. You know, it's hard to get too down on this one because it costs £122, and for that you get a quad with FPV, with a radio, ready to go, and it does its job. You can fly it, you can FPV it. If I was starting out and that was my first FPV flight, I would be pretty made up, because in my FPV flight, the first one, I crashed twice. I think I broke a leg on my tricopter, although I did build it myself, so you get what you get what you deserve there. A couple of other weirdies I forgot to mention about this one. The VTX, the way you change channel, it's an 8-channel VTX, and there's some little dip switches just under here. And when I had a look at what the frequencies are, this corresponds to, in the old money, what you call band B. The only word of warning there is if you're like me and you've got some Fat Sharks with the old internal 5.8 receiver, they just work on band F Fat Shark. But most people, and certainly most new people I guess, would have the 40-channel receivers, and you've absolutely got no problem there. I was using one of those plug-in things in my Fat Sharks that give me 40 channels. Certainly the handling could have been better. It didn't like prop wash. It had that weird thing where it kind of felt like it was moving back on me, a bit of bounce back. It was quite reminiscent of my old 3S quad that's on PPM, which is why I thought, was this a PPM thing, or has somebody whacked up D too hard and it's bouncing around? I don't know, and that's what I want to do next. I mean, as it is, I think it's not a bad little quad. If it's your very first thing, you haven't got a radio, you haven't got any quad, and this is the sort of way you want to go, the sort of little race style micro stuff, not a bad option. But I think also after a little while you'll be like, well, what else can I do with it? And that's kind of what I want to do next. So this is it as it stands, and I've flown it out of the box and it works, it does its job. It doesn't set my world on fire, I think that's fair to say. And, you know, the design and the weight of this means it's never going to be the agile thing that something like the last quad I reviewed, the AR95 or AR Pro 95mm is going to be. That power to weight ratio on that one blows this away. However, it doesn't mean that this is a bad quad, it just means we need to do some more stuff to it. So I figure now I've done flying out the box as somebody would, and it worked and it was fine. Let's see what we can do with it. So what I'm going to do in part 2 is let's flash a better Betaflight onto it. Obviously no OSD, so I need to have a good look about what the voltage alarm is there instead of something more suitable. Get the camera on the right angle, obviously get air mode in and do switch arming, which means I have to figure out how to work this type of radio. I haven't touched anything but OpenTX, and before that Open 9X. I think it was called Open 9X, something like that, beforehand. So this is weird. I'll have a look. I mean, again, I'm feeling this now. It feels fine. I was out in the field. It felt loose. Maybe it's just my thumbs were going numb. But I'll see if I can tighten this up at all. But anyway, that's it for now. I'll be back in part 2. Of course, you want to check this out meantime. Please take a look at the Gearbest website. I'll put a link below, and thanks very much for them to sending this over, even if it wasn't expected. There you go. But I look forward to seeing exactly what we can get out of it in part 2. See if we can make it much better. I hope so. Join me then. See you later. Bye.